All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this, our last event of the Central Wisconsin Book Festival. For this event, we have Tiffany Midge, who will be reading from Burying My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, and also some new poetry from her forthcoming book, Horns. Before we get started, I am going to show a sponsor video here so we can thank all of our sponsors. If I can find the right screen. All right.
Welcome to the 2020 Central Wisconsin Book Festival. This week of amazing events is possible only because of the support of our sponsors, which include
the Marathon County Public Library,
the Friends of the Marathon County Public Library,
the MCPL Foundation,
the Community Arts Grant Program
of the Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin,
with funds provided by the Wisconsin Arts Board, which is a state agency,
the Community Foundation,
and the B.A. and Esther Greenheck Foundation,
the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service,
the Merco Foundation Fund,
Wisconsin Public Radio,
the Master Gardener Program of Marathon County,
North Central Area Congregations Organized to Make an Impact,
or Naomi,
and Yankee Bookstore.
Thank you to all of our friends and partners who make the Wisconsin Book Festival possible.
And we thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I will introduce Tiffany and then she'll go ahead and get started reading. And as she's reading, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. And we'll go through those at the end. So this is Tiffany Midge.
Hello.
She is, she's a poet and an author, a poet. She writes poetry and humor essays. She also is very active on social media, so you can always find her there. Her writing has appeared in publications such as The Butter, Waxwing, and Indian Country Today. She's the author of the award-winning poetry collection, The Woman Who Married a Bear, and the memoir, Burying My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, and her forthcoming collection of poetry is called Horns. So without further ado, here's Tiffany Midge.
Thank you. Was that Danielle?
Yes.
Okay. I lost my screen again. I can just see myself. So it's just like I'm having a little conference with myself, which is probably reminds me a lot of when I was this little girl and I used to play inside of the guts of not the gut, but inside of a gutted out television set. And I would be in there for hours putting on my own shows. That's kind of what this feels like. So I should have a lot of practice to my imaginary audience. Thank you so much to the Central Wisconsin Book Festival and Daniel and Chad and all of the other people that are sponsoring. And it's a pleasure to be here in my basement office. Wow, coming to you live. I wanted to start my reading from some selections, a new work, a couple of new works, and then something from some poems from Horns, because I was feeling sort of Halloween-y, and there's a lot of poems from that book, Horns, that are especially Halloween-y, but not like, I don't know, they're just sort of macabre, and they're sort of the feminine grotesque, sort of commentaries on the feminine grotesque in certain stories and media and television that are pretty fun to put together, imagining you know, what it's like inside of the minds of certain characters. Like King Kong's Girlfriend and Frankenstein's Bride, and they're pretty much persona poems, I would say. But they cover a lot of territory. And so let's start with, I will start with The Monster's Bride questions the motives of her creator. And this one's about the Frankenstein's bride. The plugs that jut out from her neck, she's curious. What are they for? The fiery thoroughfare of crisscross scars from temple to jaw, brow to ear. Should she look for something implicit there? One eye brown, pilfered from an orange-haired prostitute in Potter's Field, the other fixed askew in her head, a child's like new ornament. Is he a misogynist? Did his mother abandon him? One arm, the muscular backhoe of a field worker's, connected to the jagged star of a hand. She wonders, is she expected to work? The vagina, intact and as pretty as a postcard sunset, should she ruin it for him? The abdomen owns the legacy of multiple births, a miller's wife spitting out babes like peas. Is there room to grow more? What hair that's left is black as licorice, sparse on her scalp like a locust-run crop. Does she secretly love his sister? Not she, he. Does he secretly love his sister? Her dresses hung in the closet like sides of beef, taffetas, crinolines, colors of Esplanade sherbets. Should she dance for him? At night, locked in her chambers, she hears desire's low growl, smells iron, lust, rain. What does it mean? Is it for her? Okay, so, and then the next one on this list is called Amateur Psychoanalysis of Children's Literature. I'm probably going to be struck down by lightning for this one. Seems very profane, to me anyway. Amateur Psychoanalysis of Children's Literature. Oompa Loompas, representative of id, ego, and superego's integration. Eat me, drink me, tell me again, all the ways Alice isn't acting out a Christ complex. Sure, Pippi Longstocking has daddy issues, but what's more concerning, have you seen her horse? Though often misdiagnosed as a compulsive literalist, when it comes to Amelia Bedelia's affliction, there is no DSM-5 listing. Does George suffer from a Cinderella or Oedipal complex? This is undecided, but clearly his keeper is a giant banana. Freud believed that spiders are the unconscious symbol for vaginas. What does that say about Wilbur, a pig, and Charlotte, a spider? Green eggs and ham is just another way of denying one's male and female latent phase of development. What James is actually doing with a sky-born peach remains to be seen, but plenty of people can see it's a giant piece of ass. Willy Wonka, isn't that the most penis-y name you've ever heard? Each child is a different deadly sin. Dick and Jane, don't cotton to coincidence. Dog is God spelled backwards, and Spot is tops, writes Jane in her synchronicity diary. It wasn't a dream, the lands of where the wild things are, but man's journey into his subconscious. For Veruca Salt to be put right, like all narcissists of her ilk, requires no less but a good thrashing. Good night, moon, or rage against the dying of the light, do not go gently, a bedtime story for the elderly. The very hungry caterpillar, not to be confused with the human centipede. Everyone poops, a symbol of anal development phase or manifestation of castration anxiety. Are you my mother is the refrain in every therapist's office, in every lover's bed. Is anybody out there? Can anybody hear me? Oh, I see you guys nodding, but somehow you have your mutes on. Okay. Sorry, I just got really quiet. I just wanted to make sure people were still there because I'm not seeing your faces. Okay. This piece is from it's Miss Borden's account of things, and Miss Borden, of course, that being Lizzie Borden. On television, they've been making these movies about, like, for instance, Agnes, is that her name? Agnes from Stephen King's novel. What is that Stephen King's novel? Annie Wilkes. They made a television series about Annie Wilkes' backstory. And I only watched like 1 or 2 episodes of it. It was just too weird. But then the other day, I saw that they had made a television series about Nurse Ratched from like one of the best books ever in American literature. And that was a pretty strange series. But I got to thinking last night when I was watching for Fatal Attraction for like the most thousandth time I've ever seen that, they need to do a backstory of Alex Forrest. Because I'm really curious, after seeing, I'm really curious what her whole backstory is. And if somebody's going to make that into a television series, because that would be super. And I wondered who would play that, these monstrous women from these stories, and why we're so fascinated with them. So this one is Miss Borden from Lizzie Borden. Miss Borden's account of things. Only the wallpaper, yellow cabbage roses trimmed with larkspur, can say, I was of course indisposed during the awful business eating pears in the carriage house. That's how it went over. 12 stern men, incomprehensible, a proper lady of distinction born into a family of textiles and cotton. To think it. Looking over the damage, I thought, how curious, such winsome blossoms, the blood dappled athwart Abby's eider-down quilt. She'd scream if she saw it. 14 blows to father in the sitting room, a spectacle, his head lolling about on the fainting couch like a crushed melon. In the seance, Lady Oneida relieved my burdens, my misgivings licked clean as a cat. But I knew the ghosts were talking, voices whining like distant violins, compromising my agency, telling me what to do. To have tipped back father's bourbon 10 thimblefuls, a right anecdote for such rancor harbored in my throat, might have done the trick. But instead, I took the tea, cheap and plain, because the picot had been misplaced, and I burned the dress, an indication of guilt, they said, and took a bath. Instead, I should have bought a hat or a sash of ribbon, red. In the evenings now, on our stately porch, I languish, I wait, while overhead geese drag the clouds like bridal lace, unworn and ruined, bedraggled debris, such terrible, fatal flowers, a waste. Somebody can challenge me on this if they want, but when I was doing research for this poem, it said that she had delivered 14 blows and not 40. And that could be wrong information. I don't know. I just read 14. And of course, the song, as everyone knows, is, Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. Somebody should put that on a cross stitch. There's this piece that's a woodcut. It's an erotic woodcut of a man named I can't even pronounce that. Ikuri-e. It's a genre by the Japanese artist Hokusai. It's from 1820, and it's the octopus, Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, and it's the octopus making love with this nice young lady on the beach. And I absolutely adore that piece. It's not because it's hentai, because I don't think that it is, although a lot of hentai, Japanese hentai, sort of arrived from that. But I've just been fascinated by that particular painting, or actually it's a drawing, but it looks like it's a woodcut. And so I wrote a poem about it. It says, Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. Lover to taste and not devour, to breathe and not inhabit the breath. Heaven, your arms, python resolute, salt fierce as any Titan. Open, close, clutch, cleave. I sing praise for water, tide a veil caught in my hair. Patrons, you must know this is no dream. You slide green as an eel through the fabric of my nights, your coarse needle agile, quick and sharp, a slick shawl beyond aspect and ratio. O Emperor, what oysters are these? Before you existed only acts, you are pretending. Even the moon is jealous, she pouts despite her grand theater of stars. My desire is an origami riot, chrysanthemum melancholy. My husband mocks me as an octopus's trifle. You think I'm nonplussed? No, unimpressed. He thinks me a garnish. Lover to you, I am a radish, a ravishing, lavish, lasciviousness, a slavish thing. Let me see. I'll read this last one from the poetry book that I have coming out called Horns. This one's called Portrait of a Backwoods Wife with an Axe to Grind. And that is, of course, Paul Bunyan's wife. It sort of startles me that so many of these poems and so many of these figures that I'm writing about don't seem to have their own names. It seems like the majority of them don't have a name. It's always like Paul Bunyan's wife, or King Kong's bride, or Monster's bride, things like that. I should try to fix that at some point and give them all names. Tree, babe. Last night's supper, a rabbit stew I'd set a trap for all month. An acre of corn I shucked for a week, and he spoke just 2 words, tree, babe, over and over like a parrot. Sure was a whole other story through courtship. Ain't it always, though? You'd think men of grand myth, those larger-than-life folks, could deliver romance in proportion to the campfire ballads. You'd think heroic, right? Epic, wrong. How many hours did I pore over the recipes? 100 ways to cook mammoth. How to stretch a carcass into next week. Easy budgets for folk deities. When I begged for a holiday, he said tree, which means Eureka on business, or Mount Shasta again, a summit meeting on redwoods, like that's a vacation. So I says to him, you love trees so much, you should have married one. And he picks up his axe, heads for the door, eyeing me all suspicious, like I'm gonna go Lizzie Borden on him, and says, babe, Just that, babe. Let me take a drink here. Okay. I'd like to share with you this section from Chuck E. Cheese, Burying My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese. This is my little book here. I don't know if the words are backwards. They're backward on my side. These were the pieces that, the companion pieces that I published in McSweeney's. And this one called The Handmaid's Tale and America's Historical Amnesia won a pushcart. And okay, so I thought I would share those. They're from a chapter in the book that's titled, Gosh Darn It, You Say Patriarchy, I Say Malarkey, Dollars to Donuts, Cuckoo Banana Pants, You Gals and Your Lady Power This and That. It's like my feminist chapter. The Handmaid's Tale and America's Historical Amnesia, an open letter. Dear Baron, Dakota, Jezebel, Bronte, Caprice, Cher, et al. I don't mean to single anyone out here, but as an Indigenous woman, it behooves me to point out that while I perfectly understand your fondness for The Handmaid's Tale as a white feminist anthem, I can't help but feel all somehow about it. Each week when all of you are discussing and posting recaps of the latest episode on Facebook, etc., I'm resisting the urge to cram my face into the couch pillows to keep from screaming. I don't mean to point blame on anyone per se, but I'm talking to you, Katniss, Guinevere, and Fig. You see, Veronica, while The Handmaid's Tale presents a dystopian world ruled by a white totalitarian and fascist regime, and while it appears to bear at least some similarity to our current conservative administration, Reese, and as entertaining as The Handmaid's Tale is for consumers of premium television and popular culture, Madison, might I offer a reminder that the Republic of Gilead is in fact fictional. And at least for the time being, Fleur, white women are not being forcibly recruited into brothels, radioactive work farms, or as baby-making vessels for the Republic. But if I may be so bold, do you know what's actually not fictional, Kinsey? The Indian Maiden Tale. Yes, Indigenous women are well acquainted with that American dystopian nightmare. And at the risk of sounding like old broomstick up her ass Aunt Lydia, an episode from the Indian Maiden's Tale is when Indigenous children were torn from their mothers and confined to residential boarding schools, forced to contend with all manner of horrors and abuses, a hellscape of horrors and abuses, not so very different from those portrayed in your favorite TV programming. So I hope that the next time you tune into Hulu, Waverly, you'll pause and think about Indigenous women and children who endured unconscionable suffering. And during commercial breaks, Fiona, may I also remind you that Indigenous women suffer violence and rape at astonishing rates. The Department of Justice in 2016 reported 56% of 2,000 women surveyed had experienced sexual violence. And if that doesn't have you reaching for the smelling salts, Eloise, sterilization of Indigenous women was rampant. The U.S. General Accounting Office reported that the Indian Health Service sterilized 3,400 Indigenous women between 73 and 76. And according to report compiled by the Lakota People's Law Project, LARC, Indigenous women are incarcerated at 6 times the rate of white women. I hope that you'll think of that the next time Offred debases herself by saying, "Blessed be the fruit," or Miss Waterford sits pensively in her blue frock in her blue room, thinking about how miserable her life is and how she wants to disappear right into the fucking wallpaper forever. As entertaining as The Handmaid's Tale is for fans of Orwellian nihilistic programming, Betsy, it does not represent all of society, but it does effectively represent the cultural and historical amnesia of America. Saffron. And maybe you will switch to the History Channel and watch an episode of The Indian Maiden's Tale instead. Hi, and sincerely, Tiffany Midge. I received an enormous amount of flack for that piece, which of course I dished up like with a spoon. It was really fun and interesting to read all of that online, all the responses, even the bad ones, because I found them so funny. It was like, oh, wow, okay. Let's see. This one is, I wanted to read another piece from Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's that was about Standing Rock protests and how it coincided with the installation of this 50-foot Lakota woman on the banks of the Missouri River. So it was kind of a startling set of events to have corresponded with that. And it made my imagination kind of go, whoa. Okay, so this one is, it's a piece called Attack of the 50-Foot Lakota Woman. In September 2016, a 50-foot monument bearing the likeness of an unnamed Lakota woman, replete with a blowing-in-the-wind star blanket shawl, was installed upon the banks of the Missouri River in Chamberlain, South Dakota. Her creator titled the giantess sculpture Dignity. At the time of Dignity's launch, if you followed the Missouri River to the north, another launch took place. Concussion grenades, water cannons, rubber bullets, dog attacks, a launch of incalculable greed and disregard for life. The no-dapple demonstration and standoff was an event on a scale which the world has never seen, and it sparked universal awareness and attention towards the most critically urgent issue of our time, protecting the water. Miniwachoni, water is life. The Dakota Access Pipeline, expected to cover 1,172 miles and to connect the Bakken and Three Forks production areas in North Dakota to Patoka, Illinois. The pipeline will enable domestically produced light sweet crude oil to reach major refining markets. The pipeline cuts straight through ancestral lands to the Standing Rock Nation and threatens their main water supply, the Missouri River, Minnesota, or Sosi. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Preservation Officer, owns the northernmost land of the Standing Rock Reservation. The northern border is the Cannonball River. The eastern border is the Missouri River. From her land, you can see the pipeline corridor. The land she grew up on tells the history of this river back 2,000 years. When I think of the Dignity sculpture and the militarization and standoffs in the small, otherwise peaceful communities on Standing Rock where my own mother and grandparents were born, and specifically when I think of monsters in regards to the Black Snake prophecy, I can't help but think of the 1958 creature feature Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. In the movie, a rich socialite encounters an alien life form and is transformed into a giantess, a 50-foot she-beast. The King Kong-sized woman goes on a rampage after discovering her husband in a bar with a no-good floozy. 8 industrial-sized hooks, 4 lengths of chain, 40 gallons of plasma, an elephant syringe, and electrical fire later, she is finally subdued. The authorities responsible for successfully capturing and bringing her down holler things like, "I can't shoot a lady. What do you want me to do, salt her tail?" Which I have absolutely no idea what that even means. In my reveries, the Dignity sculpture breaks from her foundation, secures the blue star quilt firmly around her shoulders, and follows the Missouri River north to Cannonball, up to the Ocheti-Sakowin Seven Councils fire, straight into the heart of things, and gets to work killing the black snake. In my reveries, the authorities do not succeed in bringing her down. 8 industrial-sized hooks, 4 lengths of chain, 40 gallons of plasma, an elephant syringe, and electrical fire. In my daydreams, she's not defeated, but victorious and freeze-framed eternally, despite concussion grenades and dock attacks, water cannons, and rubber bullets. The land she grew up on tells the history of this river back 2,000 years. What stories of this river will be told in 2,000 more? Sorry, spacing out there. I thought that I would just close my reading because it's like 35 minutes after the hour. I thought I would close the reading with an open letter to white girls regarding pumpkin spice and cultural appropriation. Hang on. Because October 1st is coming up. And we all have pumpkin spice season to look forward to. It's another open letter. Dear Kennedy, Madison, Scout, Brittany, Cassidy, Cheyenne, et al. Not to sound like I'm singling anyone out here, but as an Indigenous woman, I feel a scoosh bit territorial, to put it mildly, about the commercial appropriation of pumpkin spice and how each year seems worse than the last. I don't mean to exaggerate, but the soon-to-come pumpkin spice season virtually impales me with dread as I wait for the pumpkin spice hysteria to lay siege upon my otherwise placid pumpkin spice-free life. I don't intend to pumpkin spice shame anyone, but I'm talking to you, Piper, Lisbeth, and Clementine. Pumpkin and their kinfolk squash have a very specific meaning for Indigenous people. Squash is among the 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and are specific to several Eastern tribes, such as the Iroquois. I hope you will keep that in mind when you order up your next pumpkin spice latte, Mackenzie, or light your candelabra of pumpkin spice scented candles nestled among those inevitable gourds so tastefully arranged on your autumnal table, Aspen. I hope that when you feel that irresistible urge to impulse buy those pumpkin spice Oreos or that pumpkin spice Special K or even that pumpkin spice scented Listerine or feminine hygiene product, Matilda, that you'll stop and take a moment to think about the origins of that pumpkin spice Purina cat food you are so casually placing on the checkout counter. I hope that you'll pause and reflect upon how your irresistible urge for pumpkin spice Cheerios, Hortense, is part and parcel the same irresistible urge that brought your ancestors to our shores, that same irresistible urge your ancestors had when they slashed and burned, slayed, and pillaged their way across North America in the name of their one true Lord. And while I don't agree that pumpkin spice scratch and sniff liner paper for your cupboards is a particularly wise or dignified choice for your new apartment, Peyton, I can still appreciate a handful of pumpkin spice Skittles just like the next gal. And I can even appreciate the novelty of motherfucking pumpkin spice ranch dressing, Vanderbilt. I'm not a complete Philistine. I personally have never had a pumpkin spice latte, and even if you handed one to me, Ariel, and even if I was very cold or very thirsty, Lexus, I doubt that I would drink it. I am troubled by the colonial undercurrents of pumpkin spice, Finnegan, and in an effort to create awareness of pumpkin spice cultural appropriation and to help implement safe space environments, Delaney, there needs to be at minimum pumpkin spice free zones at all coffee shops and restaurants, and preferably assorted autumnal drinks for women of color. maybe chai or jalapeno chocolate chai. I feel it's important to decolonize the pumpkin, Portia, and place limits on the settler mentality's love affair with all things pumpkin spice. Hannah, yours truly, Tiffany Midge. Okay, that leaves us like 20 minutes, I think. We're doing pretty good.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really, I think it's really different reading some of those essays to yourself and then hearing them read out loud too. So that was really cool. It's just, it's a different experience. Just a reminder that if you have any questions for Tiffany, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. So while you're thinking of questions, I have a few that I've got ready here. So during the humor discussion on Thursday, you said you didn't start writing humor until after you'd met your partner. So how is writing, I think that's when you said you started.
When I feel like I hadn't started like writing it on purpose.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess like, how is it different writing humor than it is writing something non-humorous, or maybe that is supposed to be non-humorous?
It's a shift, basically. I'm always a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, I feel like this more serious stuff, I have a serious side, obviously, and it's nice to, to shift gears and go to those areas. But I was just going to say that sometimes I'm just disappointed that I can't write something funny, because I'd like to write funny things rather than serious things. But I do have like a serious piece that I wrote for the Massachusetts Review that should be coming out. And the tone on that is just like, it's about COVID and it's just very dark, right? I didn't really write like a funny spirited piece about COVID. So to address that, it's it's definitely a different mindset, but I would rather just write humor, I think. For now anyway.
Sure. Yeah. I know we all kind of need a laugh now, don't we? Okay, so we do have a question from someone who's watching right now, and they ask, have you recorded any of your books?
I haven't yet, but there's sort of a deal going through to have a recording of Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, and I imagine that that's going to be released sometime this spring. And they're just figuring out all the details on that. I don't even know if I'll be reading it or who's going to exactly be reading it. I put in for requests on who I wanted to read for it, but it's still trying to get all that figured out. So that should be coming through. I'm happy about that.
That's awesome. I'm excited for that. Okay, so so you read your open letter to white women concerning The Handmaid's Tale. And you've written other pieces that kind of have, they kind of tread that line between something that's kind of funny, but also something that's really serious, right? Like it addresses these serious issues that Native women have dealt with. How do you decide which pieces get that slightly humorous edge and which pieces are maybe too serious to add the humor to?
Just having the common sense. I don't think that I'm going to be able to at any time soon address murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, as like a musical, as a comedy, musical. But that's one thing. I don't know. What do they say? What's the adage? Comedy plus time. but for the most part, it would just be common sense, and then your approach, how you're approaching the piece. And sometimes you will skirt that, and you will most definitely offend people. But I just feel like that's the risk of humor, and that's what makes humor a lot of times, so funny, is that you're laughing at the idea, the fact that, that it's controversial, or that it makes you, intake your breath, or, that's part of the fun of that, I think, or the funniness of that, is that it takes risk a lot of times. Like I'll go through the Onion articles sometimes, and they're just like, whoa, they went there, wow. And it's just a decision that you make, and how far that you want to go with a particular issue. But it's definitely a way to bring awareness to an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of our guests has asked if you could talk a little bit about the comments that you received about the Handmaid's Tale piece.
Sure. Let's see. It was a while back. I think that there was just a lot of people that first of all, they thought that it was not acknowledging that the author of The Handmaid's Tale, can't think of her name right now. We all know who she is, though. But that she had addressed, peoples, meaning Indigenous people and other demographic groups in that novel, in that original novel. And so I seem to have been, saying in my humor piece that hadn't been acknowledged or addressed. But it was a humor piece, and I was playing with it, so I feel like I had carte blanche to, do whatever I needed to do with that. But there's just a lot of very pissed off, white women that felt that I was being shaming, or, that I was just coming down way too hard, on whatever assumptions that they were having. And I think clearly they just sort of missed the point of the entire thing, but at the same time, they proved the point really, really well too. So insofar as specific comments about that piece, that was the general ballpark of comments. And like I was saying before, they were really entertaining for me to read. And I think I've developed a pretty good thick skin, become very callous, over time, when it comes to certain kinds of criticisms about my work. Because I think also too, when you're writing humor that's, kind of skirts that edge, and takes risks, that I'm gonna lose my train of thought because I just got distracted. So I tell my partner, leave the house, because I get too distracted. But yeah, so those were basically the comments. But when you're writing that, you expect it, and you develop, a thicker hide. And it becomes a form of entertainment for me.
Well, good. I'm glad. I know a lot of satire ends up getting misinterpreted, right? Like, we've seen that multiple times, just like in the literary community. And so I guess, like, writers of satire and humor probably do need to develop that thick skin. So to change gears a little bit, I think I read in an interview one time that you started considering yourself a writer at a very young age, somewhere around like preteens or something like that. Was there ever anything else that you wanted to do, or was it always just writing?
Well, I'd always done all sorts of artistic, ventures. I did live theater for years, all throughout my adolescence and late adolescence. For a long time, I wanted to be an actor. And of course, I drew and I painted, and I had this like little art studio in my bedroom. And I used to make my own radio show program on my tape recorder called FUCK Radio. And I used to talk into my recorder and pretend those kinds of things and recite plays. And so it's always like just a very artistic, dreamy kind of kid, daydreamy, sort of spacey kid that no one thought would really amount to anything. Because I felt like I was the only creative person in my entire family. And my grandmother had creative outlets. She liked to paint, things like that. So she sort of understood, my, fascination with the arts. And of course, my father was a theater person, a theater major. So I had that going for me and people understanding in that regard. So it was, so it started, I was always creative. Always wanted to be creative.
That's cool. I find that a lot of people who go into something in the arts are usually involved in other things in the arts as well. So, or at least the people that I know.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. I was able to write about the theater aspect, that, sort of that chapter of my life. I have like an essay in my book, The Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese, about sort of the theater years. And it's one of my favorite pieces. I originally had it titled, If Sam Shepard Were Here Right Now, He'd Shit His Fucking Pants. But an editor told me to change the title so that I wouldn't give away the punchline. So it's later in the book, and now it's called something about, I can't remember now. But I really like that title. And it's, it was like an actual thing that a theater director said during rehearsal. It was like a real trip. So I wrote all about that. Yeah, I changed it to My Name is Moonbeam McSwine because I wanted to play Moonbeam in one of the little Abner play. But of course, I was never getting those roles. I was always getting like the background chorus roles. Never lead. It's pretty trippy. And the Siam Sequences talks a little bit about the theater as well, with the play with The King and I, where again, I was, reduced to playing, the background chorus, reduced to playing like a Thai wife or a wife from Siam, one of the hundreds of wives. It's just interesting and funny to me, all that kind of stuff, particularly in, today's climate. You're looking back at that and you're like, oh my God, all those people in yellow face, all of those people dressed up like this and that, and just like the pure lasciviousness of the characters in Little Abner. I mean, my God. And just everything about those plays, right? It's like by today's standards, it's like watching a John Hughes movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do have time for a few more questions. If anybody has any more questions that they want to send in for Tiffany. I guess one thing that we haven't really talked a lot about is your writing process. Do you have like a set way that you do things, or do you just kind of write when you feel like it, or, what is your process like?
I'm doing a lot of revision right now. And that's probably the fun part. That's probably like the downhill of writing, just getting stuff onto the page. I was going to say shit, just getting shit onto the page. It just seems like an arduous task. I don't know why. Maybe it's just like my attention span, during this, COVID thing is just like weird. And, but the revision, I have lots of things to revise all the time. And that's always like a fun process and an amazing process at times, because things just really surprise you and jump out every once in a while. So that's sort of my writing process. We're doing a lot of revision.
Yeah, that's like the opposite of my students, they're all like,
oh really?
I'll just put the stuff on the page and you can deal with it, They don't want to do the revising themselves usually.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the fun part though. That's the good part, I think. Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad that we have some advocates for revision. It looks like at least one other person agrees with you in the comments here. All right. Do we have any more? Oh, let's see here. Oh, I guess like, okay, so we do have a question here that talks about, like, obviously you don't have a problem with cursing while you're doing readings and stuff like that. Do people ever have an issue with that when you're giving a reading or a talk or something?
I don't think so. I mean, no one's complained so far.
Good.
I mean, obviously I wouldn't do that if I was, well, I mean, I might to children because, but yeah, I mean, it takes an audience. You just have to, like, know your crowd, feel the room.
Which I suppose is harder to do virtually.
I hope so. I asked you before we did this, though, and you said I could swear.
Yes, yeah. I did say that.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's taking issue with it, just to be clear. I think it's just asking if anybody has.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you everyone for coming. Somebody said children need fucking cursing sometimes. So you've got some people agreeing with you. So thank you for being here with us and giving your reading, and thank you everyone who came to the event and everything. We do have a survey that if you feel the urge, we would ask that you please fill out after the event. It's pretty short. We'll put a link in the chat here. And I guess, Tiffany, do you have anything that you want to end on?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I just want to say, thanks so much to you, Danielle, for helping me through this whole thing, and it's been really fun. And those are good questions.
I had a lot of fun too. I'm really glad that we could get you, here, I guess, not really here, but, to have an event here with us. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And I'm going to put the survey, or Jill, did you already put that in there? I think you did.